I still remember that night. It was quiet in the house, too quiet. The kind of silence where you can hear the clock ticking in the hallway, every little creak of the old wooden floor, even the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I was sitting in my living room with the lights low, a cup of tea in my hand, thinking about my son's future. The wedding. His wedding. It was supposed to be the happiest time in a parent's life, right? But something about the way things were happening lately didn't feel right to me. I decided to call her, my son's fiancée, or at least that's what I still thought she was. She had always been polite with me, though sometimes I felt there was a distance, something she was keeping hidden behind her smile. That night, I told myself it was time to ask. Just a simple question, nothing too serious. I wanted to know the date. I wanted to mark it down, circle it in red on the calendar like mothers do, and count down the days until my boy would stand in front of everyone and say his vows. When she picked up the phone, her voice was calm, but a little tired. I could hear something in the background, like a door shutting, footsteps moving quickly. I tried not to overthink it. I asked her softly, "So, when's the wedding? Has he told you when the date is set?" There was a pause. A long pause, longer than it should have been. Then her answer came, so casual, so simple, that it didn't even register in my head at first. "We got married yesterday." For a moment, I didn't breathe. My hand tightened around the cup so hard I thought it would break. My heart gave this strange thump in my chest, heavy, sharp. Yesterday? Married yesterday? How could that be possible? I thought maybe I heard wrong. Maybe the phone line cut? Maybe she said something else. My voice cracked as I asked, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" And she repeated it, clear as day, each word landing like a stone in my chest. "We got married yesterday." I froze. I felt like the room tilted around me. The shadows on the wall seemed longer, darker. I looked around at the living room, the photos of my son on the shelves, his smile from when he was a child, the little trophies from school sports. And suddenly it hit me. My own child had gotten married and I wasn't there. No one told me. No one invited me. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. All I managed was a whisper. Why didn't anyone tell me? On the other end of the line, there was silence. Just silence. And then, almost too faint to catch, I heard another sound. A man's voice, low and muffled, saying something I couldn't understand. Then the quick slam of a door. Her breath caught like she had been startled. "Listen, I can't talk right now," she said quickly, almost in a rush. "I'll explain later." And just like that, the call ended. I sat there in the dim light, staring at the black screen of my phone, my tea gone cold in my hand. My mind was racing, but my body felt heavy, as if all the air in the room had thickened around me. "Married yesterday?" The words echoed over and over again in my head. I thought of my son, the little boy I raised, the one who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, the one who whispered to me at night that he was scared of the dark. And now, the man he had become. He had chosen to begin a new life, but without me there to witness it. Without even a word. I felt sadness first, deep and sharp. But then something else followed. Fear. Because there was something strange in her voice, something that didn't fit. Not joy, not excitement. No newlywed glow in her tone. Instead, it was flat, nervous, almost secretive. And that sound in the background, the voice, the door slam, why did it bother me so much? Who was with her? Why did she sound like she didn't want me to hear? I sat there in the dark, trying to calm myself. But every second dragged me deeper into questions I couldn't answer. Why was the wedding hidden? Why was I left out? What was going on between my son and this woman? I wanted to call her back, but my hand wouldn't move. A part of me was too afraid of what she might say. I wanted to call my son, but my heart ached with the fear of hearing him confirm it. That he had chosen to step into this new life without me. Minutes passed, maybe hours, I can't be sure, while I sat in the same spot, listening to the silence of the house pressing in on me. Outside, the night was cold, the wind pushing against the windows, the branches scratching like fingers against the glass. And still, Those words spun inside my head, circling like vultures. We got married yesterday. I thought of the look in her eyes the last time I saw her. She was polite, yes, but there was something else there. Something unreadable. As though she was holding back words she would never say out loud. And then the strangest thought crept into my mind. Was my son safe? It was ridiculous, I told myself. She wasn't a bad person. At least I didn't think so. But why would two young people in love hide something so important? Something that should have been celebrated? Why would they cut everyone out, even their family? Unless there was something more. Something they didn't want us to see. My chest felt tight, my palms sweaty, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alone in my own home. The shadows stretched around me, and the silence grew heavier, until even the ticking of the clock seemed threatening. I stood, pacing the room, telling myself I needed answers. I needed to hear the truth directly from my son. But as I reached for my phone, a shiver ran down my spine. What if he didn't answer? Or worse, what if he answered and confirmed every fear in my heart? I held the phone in my hand, staring at his number, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted so badly to press it, to hear his voice, to demand the truth. But then, just as I was about to call, I saw something. A notification lit up my phone. A new message, from a number I didn't recognize. It said only one line. Don't ask questions about the wedding. And that was when I realized this was only the beginning. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the strange message burning in my mind. Don't ask questions about the wedding. The words repeated over and over, echoing louder than the ticking clock on my nightstand. My chest felt heavy, my thoughts tangled. Who sent it? Why would anyone tell me to stay quiet? I wanted to believe it was just a cruel prank, maybe someone with the wrong number. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't. The timing was too sharp. The message came only minutes after I hung up with her. It was connected. Someone didn't want me to know the truth. The house felt colder than usual that morning. The sunlight crept weakly through the curtains, but it didn't warm me. I walked to the kitchen, made myself some coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, children were walking to school, laughing, backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. A woman jogged past, earbuds in, her ponytail swaying. Life was moving as normal for everyone else. But inside me, something was broken. I stirred the coffee slowly, staring at the dark swirl in the cup, and my mind went back to the first day I met her, my son's bride. Now my daughter-in-law. It was at a family dinner. I remember it so clearly because even then something felt strange. She walked into the room with a smile, polite, calm, but her eyes were guarded, like she had built a wall no one could climb. She shook my hand, said it was a pleasure to meet me, but her fingers were cold, limp. Not the warm handshake of someone opening themselves to family. Throughout the dinner, she barely spoke. My son did most of the talking, telling stories from work, asking questions about my health, making sure I was comfortable. But she sat beside him, quiet, her smile flickering now and then like a candle about to go out. When she did speak, her answers were short, safe, almost rehearsed. I remember leaning across the table, asking her about her family. Where were they from? Did she have siblings? But she hesitated, her fork frozen above her plate, before answering with the simplest words. They live far away. We don't see each other often, and that was it. No details, no warmth. Just a wall. That night after they left, I told myself not to be paranoid. Some people are just shy. Some people take time to open up. But now, thinking back, I realized she wasn't shy. She was hiding something. The thought of it made my stomach twist. I sipped my coffee, but it tasted bitter, like ash. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to ask my son directly. The longer I waited, the worse it felt, as if the truth was sinking deeper into the shadows. I dialed his number with trembling hands. He answered quickly, his voice calm, but there was something tired about it. "Mom, is everything okay?" I swallowed hard. I spoke to her last night. She told me, "You're married yesterday, is that true?" There was silence. I could hear him breathing, steady, but he didn't reply right away. That silence told me everything before he even spoke. "Yes, Mom?" he said finally, his voice soft. "It's true." My heart sank. The words were a knife. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to steady the ache. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you want me there? I'm your mother. I should have been by your side." He sighed, a long, heavy sound. "Mom, there are things you don't understand. Things I can't explain right now." His words felt like ice water poured over me. "What do you mean, things I don't understand?" "You shut me out of your wedding. You shut your whole family out. What is going on?" But he wouldn't answer. His silence was louder than any words. Finally, he said only, "Please trust me." It was better this way. And before I could ask more, he ended the call. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear even after the line went dead. My hands trembled. Better this way? Better for who? And why was my own son acting like a stranger? My mind raced with questions, but one thought screamed above the rest. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. This wasn't love. This wasn't joy. This was fear. I couldn't sit still. I pulled out my old photo albums, flipping through pages of my son's childhood, his first steps, his birthdays, his college graduation. I stared at his smile in each picture, the joy in his eyes. But now, when I thought of his voice on the phone, I didn't hear joy. I heard worry, pressure, something heavy weighing him down. And then, another memory surfaced. One I had buried. It was a month before they announced their engagement. My son had come to visit, and while he was in the kitchen getting water, his phone buzzed on the table. A message lit up the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, but my eyes caught it before I could look away. The message said, "Don't let her find out." Not yet. At the time, I told myself it could have meant anything. Maybe a surprise, maybe a plan for a gift. But now that old memory returned like a ghost, and I realized it was connected. Something was being hidden from me, and maybe from everyone else too. My hands shook as I closed the album. I knew I couldn't let it go. If my son wouldn't tell me the truth, I would find it myself. That afternoon, I went online, searching for any sign of the wedding. Photos, announcements, anything. And after hours of scrolling, I found it. A single post buried in a friend's account. A photo. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. There they were, my son and her, standing together, dressed in wedding clothes. Not in a big hall, not in a church, not with family. It was small, almost secret. A plain room, a handful of people. No flowers, no music, no celebration. Just two people standing side by side, and a man in front of them with papers. But it wasn't just the setting that struck me. It was their faces. My son's smile looked thin, strained, nothing like the wide, happy grin I had seen so many times in his life. And her expression wasn't joy. It wasn't even calm. It was something else. Her eyes were wide, her lips pressed tight. She looked afraid, and then I saw it. In the corner of the photo, blurred but unmistakable, stood a man I had never seen before. Tall, dark suit, watching them closely. His face wasn't smiling. It wasn't kind. It was hard, cold, like he was making sure nothing went wrong. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. Who was he? Why was he there? And why did I suddenly feel like this wedding wasn't a celebration at all, but something else entirely? I couldn't stop staring at that photo. My hands were trembling as I held the phone closer, zooming in, examining every detail as though the truth was hidden in the pixels. My son was in a dark suit, his tie slightly crooked, his shoulders tense. His eyes didn't shine with joy like a man who had just married the love of his life. They looked heavy, almost hollow, as though he was forcing himself to stand there. And then her, my new daughter-in-law, though even saying the words felt strange. Her dress was simple, plain, nothing like the gown I had always imagined for my son's wedding. She didn't glow like a bride on her special day. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes wide with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or shock. It wasn't the face of a woman celebrating love, but it was the man in the corner who stole my breath. Even though he was slightly blurred, I could feel his presence in the photo. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a black suit, his expression hard as stone. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't there for joy. He looked like a guard. Watching. Controlling. I zoomed in again, but the pixels broke apart. Still, the coldness of his stare seemed to pierce through the screen. I whispered, to myself, "Who are you? And why were you there?" I put the phone down, but the image burned into my mind. I thought about what a wedding was supposed to be. Music, laughter, family, tears of joy. I had dreamed of it for years. I imagined standing there, watching my son take his vows, hearing him promise a lifetime of love. I imagined hugging him after, telling him how proud I was. But instead, it had all happened in silence behind closed doors, without me. And worse, it didn't look like a celebration at all. It looked like a ceremony under pressure, as though someone had decided it had to happen, whether they wanted it or not. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the ache that wouldn't fade. My son's life had changed forever, and I hadn't even been there to see it. I wasn't given a choice. I wasn't given a chance. The thought broke me. Tears welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. I sat there rocking slightly, whispering into the empty room. "Why didn't you tell me, my boy? Why didn't you let me stand with you?" But the photo wouldn't leave me. The way she looked, the man in the shadows, it gnawed at me. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know where this wedding had taken place, who that man was, and why everything had been hidden. So I started searching. I scrolled through names, clicked on profiles, scanned through friends of friends. Hours passed, and the sun slipped, lower in the sky, filling my room with gold and then with shadows. My eyes ached from the screen, but I refused to stop. Finally, I found something. Another photo. This one, not of them, but of the building. The friend who had posted the wedding picture had also tagged the location. A small registry office on Nasdosi-Onash, the far edge of the city, away from crowds, away from family. It wasn't the kind of place my son would have chosen. It was cold, formal, hidden. And the fact that he hadn't told anyone where it was happening only deepened the pit in my stomach. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the name of that building glowing on my screen. I whispered it aloud, testing the sound of it. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like love. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed, staring into the dark, every creak of the house making me jump. My mind replayed that image again and again, until it was no longer a photo but a scene moving in my head. My son standing stiff, her trembling, the man in the corner watching with cold eyes. I tried to picture the moment they said, "I do." Did their voices shake? Did they look at each other or at him? Were they free or were they trapped? The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit and wonder. I had to go there. I had to see the place with my own eyes. The drive was long, the road winding through parts of the city I hadn't visited in years. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached. The building came into view at last, small and gray, tucked between taller structures like it wanted to disappear. I parked and stepped out, the air cold against my skin. My heart pounded as I walked toward the door. The glass was tinted, reflecting my face back at me, pale and strained. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polish and paper. The walls were bare, the light too bright, buzzing faintly. A woman sat behind the counter, her expression polite but tired. "Can I help you?" she asked. I swallowed, my throat dry. I wanted to ask about a wedding that happened here recently. 2 young people, my son and his bride. She gave me a practiced smile. "I'm sorry, we don't give out personal details." "I'm his mother," I whispered, desperation rising in my voice. "Please, I just want to understand. I wasn't told. I wasn't there. I only want to know." The woman's smile faltered. Her eyes flickered to the side, just for a second, as though checking if someone was watching. Then she leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "You should be careful asking questions," she said softly. "Not everyone wants that day remembered." Her words sent a chill through me. My lips parted, but no sound came. I nodded slowly, stepping back. I could feel her watching me as I turned and left the building. Outside, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, the wind sharp. I stood there on the sidewalk, shaking, her words echoing in my ears. Not everyone wants that day remembered. But why? Why would anyone want to erase a wedding, unless it wasn't truly theirs to celebrate? As I drove home, my chest felt tight, my vision blurry with tears. My son's wedding should have been the brightest day of his life. Instead, it was a shadowed secret, something whispered about but never shared. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized someone didn't just want me gone. They wanted everyone gone. They wanted the wedding hidden, covered in silence. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had vanished behind the clouds, and the house stood dark against the evening sky. I sat in the car, gripping the wheel, and whispered to myself, this wasn't a wedding I missed. This was a wedding they wanted me to never see. And deep inside, I knew. I hadn't just been left out. I had been shut out on purpose. But the question that burned hotter than all the rest was this. What were they trying so hard to hide? When I returned home that evening, the silence in my house felt heavier than ever. I dropped my bag by the door, but I didn't move. I stood there in the hallway, staring into the dim rooms as though the truth might be written in the shadows. I still had that picture open on my phone, that single frozen moment of my son's wedding, the day that changed everything. I sat down at the dining table, the phone in front of me, the screen glowing faintly. I leaned closer, zooming in again and again, desperate to see something I had missed before. My son's tight smile, her wide eyes, the man in the corner. It was all burned into my mind already. But now I began to notice the details around them. In the background, near the wall, there were chairs stacked one on top of another. Not the kind of thing you'd see in a celebration, but in a rushed, practical gathering. A faint shadow stretched across the floor, angled strangely, as though someone else was there, standing just out of frame. My eyes traced the shadow, my heart beating faster. Whoever took the photo wasn't a guest celebrating a wedding. They were documenting it, watching. I turned the brightness of the screen higher, zooming in until the photo blurred. That man in the corner. His face wasn't clear, but his stance was. Hands clasped in front of him, back straight, shoulders rigid. Not relaxed, not casual. He looked like a guard. Like someone making sure things went the way they were supposed to. I whispered into the quiet room. Why was he there? Who was he protecting? Or controlling? The thought chilled me to the bone. But then my eyes returned to her face. My daughter-in-law. The woman who had given me that strange, cold reply. We got married yesterday. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes locked on something not in the frame. She didn't look like a bride who had just said yes to love. She looked trapped, afraid. And the more I stared, the more a horrible thought pressed into me. Was this even her choice? I pushed the phone away, trembling. My mind spun with possibilities, each darker than the last. What if this marriage wasn't built on love at all? What if my son had been forced? Or worse, what if he had been dragged into something dangerous that he couldn't escape? I stood and began pacing the kitchen, the floor creaking beneath my steps. The shadows of the night pressed against the windows, and I felt them closing in. My chest tightened with each thought, and I pressed my hand against the counter to steady myself. I tried to call him again. My son, my boy. The line rang, but he didn't answer. I called again, and this time the call went straight to voicemail. His voice filled my ear, calm and familiar, but it was only a recording. I left a message, my voice trembling. Please call me back. I need to understand. I need to hear your voice. When I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to will it to ring, but it stayed silent. I walked to the window, looking out at the street. The night air was still, the lamppost casting long shadows across the pavement. A neighbor's dog barked once, then stopped. The world outside seemed normal, but inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. I turned back to the table, to the photo glowing in the dark. And that was when my phone buzzed. A message. My heart jumped, hoping it was him. But when I picked it up, it wasn't his number. It was the same unknown number that had texted me before. This time, the message was longer. Stop digging. Stop asking questions. For your own good. My blood ran cold. I sank into the chair, staring at the words. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was watching me. Someone knew I was looking for answers. And now they were warning me off, but instead of stopping me, the message only fed my fear and my determination. If there was nothing to hide, why were they trying so hard to silence me? I couldn't sleep that night. I left the photo open on the table, the screen dimming and glowing as the phone locked and unlocked. I sat in the darkness, listening to the faint hum of the house, my ears straining for every sound outside. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps on the pavement, slow and steady. I moved to the window, but the street was empty. The hours crawled by, and with every tick of the clock, I felt myself slipping deeper into a maze of questions with no clear way out. The next morning, my eyes red and heavy from lack of sleep, I decided I couldn't face this alone anymore. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, who might know more. Family, friends. Someone must have seen something, heard something. I started calling relatives, starting with my sister. When I asked her if she knew about the wedding, there was a pause on the line. Then she admitted softly, "Yes, I knew. They told me not to say anything." Her words stung worse than I expected. Not to say anything? To their own mother? I whispered. She tried to soften it. They said it was sudden. They didn't want people talking. They wanted it quiet. I wanted to shout, to scream, but my voice came out broken instead. Quiet? A wedding is supposed to be joy. Why would they keep it a secret from me? But she had no answers. Only silence. I hung up, my heart pounding, and dialed another number. And another. Each time I heard the same thing. Yes, they had known. Yes, they had been told to stay quiet. No one thought to question it. No one thought to call me. It was as if the entire family had been pushed to the edges, and I had been left in the dark on purpose. By the time I ended the last call, I felt hollow, alone, betrayed. I sat in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall, each one a frozen memory of love and laughter. But now they felt like lies, mocking me with the illusion that family always stood together. I thought of my son again, the way his voice had sounded on the phone, calm but heavy, careful with every word. And I knew he was hiding something. Something bigger than me, bigger than the family. As the sun set, the sky painted red and orange. I sat in the fading light, my heart heavy with the truth that none of this was simple. And then, just as I was about to close my eyes for a moment, there came a sound, a knock, a slow, deliberate knock at my front door. My body froze, every muscle tense. The air in the room thickened. I turned my head slowly toward the door, my pulse racing so fast it drowned out everything else. I whispered into the silence, "Who could that be? At this hour?" And deep inside, I already knew this was no ordinary visitor. The knock at my door echoed through the house like thunder. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't polite, it was steady, deliberate, and heavy. Each sound seemed to crawl into my bones and freeze me where I stood. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. I still remember that night, the way the air felt thick and the silence pressed in from all sides. I moved toward the door slowly, my feet barely making a sound on the floor. My heart was pounding so hard that I wondered if the person outside could hear it. I hesitated at the handle. My mind screamed at me not to open it. Whoever had texted me earlier. What if this was them? What if opening that door meant walking straight into danger? But another part of me, the part that needed answers, pushed me forward. I unlocked it, my fingers trembling, and pulled the door open just a crack. Standing there was a man I had never seen before. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with short gray hair and a sharp, tired face. His eyes darted around the street before finally meeting mine. He wasn't dressed like a stranger off the road. He wore a dark coat, neat but plain, and in his hand was a small folded envelope. "Are you his mother?" he asked in a low voice. My throat went dry. His mother? My son's mother? Yes, who are you? He glanced over his shoulder again before leaning in closer. I don't have much time. Please take this, but don't open it here. He pressed the envelope into my hand, his fingers cold against my skin. I stammered, Wait, what is this? Who are you? Do you know about the wedding? His expression flickered just for a moment. Something like guilt or fear. Then he shook his head. I can't say. They're watching. Just keep it safe. You'll understand soon. Before I could stop him, he stepped back, looked around one last time, and walked quickly down the path. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving me clutching the envelope against my chest. I closed the door fast and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly turn the bolt. I pressed my back against the door, trying to steady my breath. Who was that man? And what could possibly be inside this envelope? The house felt colder now, as though the shadows had crept in with him. I carried the envelope into the living room and set it on the table, staring at it like it was alive. My instincts told me to open it immediately, but the man's words rang in my head. Don't open it here. I turned the envelope over in my hands. No name on it, no markings, just plain and sealed. My curiosity burned inside me, but so did fear. What if opening it meant crossing a line I couldn't step back from? The night dragged on. I sat by the table, the envelope right in front of me, and every time I reached for it, I pulled back. My phone buzzed once with another text, and I nearly jumped out of my chair. This time the message read, Don't trust anyone. No name. No number I recognized. Just those chilling words. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, What do you mean? Who am I supposed to trust then? By dawn, exhaustion finally broke me down. I slipped the envelope into a drawer and forced myself to sleep for a few hours. But when I woke up, the world outside looked the same, and nothing felt normal. That morning, I decided to take the envelope somewhere safe. Not here, not where I felt watched. I drove to the park on the edge of town, a quiet place where the trees grew thick and the air always smelled faintly of pine. The sun filtered through the leaves as I sat on a bench, the envelope heavy in my hands. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper came first. In plain handwriting, it said only this: You think this was a wedding. It wasn't. My breath caught in my throat. I read the line over and over again, each time the words cutting deeper. Then I looked at the photograph. It was my son again. But not smiling, not standing by her side. He was sitting at a long table, his head bent, his face pale. Around him stood several men in dark clothing, men I didn't recognize. One of them had a hand on his shoulder, pressing him down in his chair. My heart shattered. He wasn't celebrating. He was being held. I clutched the photo against my chest, tears blurring my vision. The truth was staring right at me, and it was worse than anything I had imagined. This wasn't a wedding of love. This was something else. Something forced, controlled. My son wasn't free. I wiped my eyes and looked around the park, half expecting someone to be watching me, but no one was there. Just a mother with a stroller, a man walking his dog. Normal people living their normal lives, while my life was unraveling piece by piece. The paper slipped from my lap onto the ground, and as I picked it up again, I noticed faint writing on the back. A second message, smaller, as if written in haste. If you want the truth, come to the old train yard at midnight. Come alone. I stared at the words, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped it again. Midnight, the old train yard. Come alone, every part of me screamed not to go. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But another part of me, the part that needed to save my son, couldn't ignore it. I drove home, my mind spinning, my heart aching. The day passed in a blur, and when night fell, I sat by the window, watching the clock tick closer to midnight. Each second felt like a lifetime. When the time came, I slipped on my coat, tucked the photo and the note into my pocket, and stepped into the cold night air. The streets were quiet, the lamps casting their pale glow on the empty pavement. The train yard wasn't far, but every step I took made me feel like I was walking deeper into something I might not escape. The yard was abandoned, the rusted rails stretching into darkness, the shells of old train cars standing like silent ghosts. The wind whistled through the broken metal, carrying with it the faint smell of rust and oil. I stood at the edge, my breath clouding in the cold air. My heart pounded in my chest, my eyes scanning the shadows, and then I heard it, a voice, low, urgent, calling from the darkness. You came. I froze, my hands clenching at my sides. Someone was here, waiting for me. But was it the man from before, or someone else entirely? The sound of that voice froze me in place. It carried through the cold night air, low and heavy, like it had traveled a long distance just to find me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I thought of running. But my legs wouldn't move. I still remember that night. I whispered to myself, because it felt like the kind of night I would never forget. The silence of the train yard, the smell of rust, the whistle of the wind, it all carved itself into me like a warning. Slowly, I turned toward the voice. A figure stepped out from behind one of the rusted train cars. The faint glow of the moon caught his face. It was the same man who had come to my door. The man with the envelope. Relief rushed through me, but so did suspicion. Why here? Why now? You shouldn't have come, he said, his eyes darting across the shadows. It's not safe, but since you're here, you need to know the truth. My voice cracked as I spoke. Please tell me what's happening to my son. Tell me why he's acting like a stranger. Why he said he was married and I wasn't there. Why that wedding looked more like a prison, he sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. Your son, he didn't choose this. None of this. They forced him. They made it look like a wedding, but it was a cover. A cover for something bigger. I felt my knees weaken. I reached for the side of the train car to steady myself. Forced by who? Who would do that to him? The man hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke in a hushed voice. Powerful people. People you don't want to cross. They've been planning this for a long time. Your son got caught in the middle. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. But why? He's just my son. A good man. What could they possibly want from him? The man stepped closer, his face tense. Because of her. The woman he married. She isn't who you think she is. She isn't just some girl who fell in love with him. She's part of them, and now, so is he. The words hit me like a hammer. I thought back to the photo. The way she looked, her eyes locked on something outside the frame, her body stiff. I remembered the cold way she had spoken to me, telling me they were already married. She didn't look happy, I whispered. She looked afraid. Exactly, he said. She's trapped too. This isn't about love, it's about control. About power. They married them off to tie loose ends. To bind them. Both of them are pawns in a game far bigger than you or I. I could barely breathe. My son wasn't just married in secret. He was being used, dragged into something I couldn't even name. Who are you? I asked, my voice trembling. Why are you helping me? For a moment, his eyes softened. I knew your son once. A long time ago. I can't stand by and watch them destroy him. But if they find out I'm speaking to you, I won't live to see tomorrow. The wind howled through the yard, and I pulled my coat tighter. Then what am I supposed to do? How do I save him? He looked around again, then leaned closer, his whisper urgent. There's a place. A house outside the city. That's where they've been keeping him. That's where this marriage was arranged. But be careful. If you go there, you'll see things you wish you hadn't. The words sent a shiver straight through me. Write it down, I said, desperate. Give me the address. He shook his head. I can't. No paper trail. Just listen carefully. He leaned in and whispered an address, his words searing themselves into my mind. I repeated it silently over and over, afraid I might lose it. When he pulled back, his face darkened. Don't tell anyone you met me. Don't show anyone that photo. And above all, don't trust the messages on your phone. They're watching you. Every move you make. Before I could ask more, he straightened, his body stiffening. His eyes darted toward the far end of the yard and his whole face changed. Fear. They're here, he hissed. I spun, my heart stopping. At the far end of the yard, two figures were moving in the shadows. Slow, deliberate steps like hunters closing in on prey. The man grabbed my arm. Go, now. Don't stop. Don't look back. I tried to pull him with me, but he shook his head. If we both run, they'll catch us. I'll hold them off. You have to get out. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered. But you'll go, he barked, shoving me away. I turned and ran. My legs burned, my breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The cold air slashed at my face, and behind me, I heard shouting, voices, a struggle. I didn't dare look back. I burst out of the yard and into the street, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might break. I kept running until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking. I threw myself inside and locked the doors, gasping for air. In the rearview mirror, the train yard loomed in the distance, dark and silent again. No movement, no sound. Whoever that man was, he had stayed behind. For me, I gripped the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face. He had given me the address. He had given me the truth, or at least a piece of it. But at what cost? My phone buzzed again, and I almost threw it in fear. With trembling hands, I picked it up. A new message. We warned you. Stop now. Next time, we won't just watch. I dropped the phone onto the seat, my whole body shaking. I knew then that the danger wasn't just around my son. It was around me too, but it didn't matter. I couldn't stop now. I had the address. I had the first real clue, and no matter what waited for me at that house, I knew I had to go. I started the car, the engine roaring into the silence, and drove into the night. The road stretched ahead like a dark tunnel, and in my chest my heart whispered the same question over and over. Would I find my son alive? The road stretched endlessly into the night, the headlights carving narrow paths through the darkness. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every mile closer to that address, my chest grew heavier, as though the shadows themselves were pressing down on me. I still remember that night, the silence in the car, the steady hum of the engine, and the fear clawing at my throat. My son was out there, somewhere ahead, and I was driving straight into the unknown to find him. The city lights faded behind me, replaced by long stretches of empty road. The trees grew thicker on either side, their branches arching overhead like dark claws. The GPS whispered directions in its calm, robotic voice, but I barely heard it. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Finally, the navigation announced, "You have arrived." I slowed the car and peered through the windshield. On the right side of the road, half hidden behind a cluster of tall pines, was the house. It was larger than I expected, 2 stories tall with a wide porch and shuttered windows. But it wasn't welcoming. The paint was peeling, the wood warped and darkened from years of neglect. A faint light flickered from one of the upstairs windows, casting a dim glow against the otherwise lifeless structure. I parked a little way down the road, out of sight, and cut the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. The air was cold, damp, carrying the smell of earth and wet leaves. I slipped out of the car, pulling my coat tighter around me, and walked slowly toward the house. Every crunch of gravel under my feet sounded like an alarm in the stillness. My eyes darted to the trees, to the shadows, convinced that someone was watching. When I reached the porch, I froze. The wooden boards creaked faintly, as though they were breathing beneath my weight. I raised my hand to knock but stopped myself. This wasn't a place for polite knocking. This was a place where answers were hidden, where truth was buried deep. I pressed my ear against the door. For a long moment, all I heard was silence, and then a sound. A faint shuffle, a voice. Low, muffled, but real, my chest tightened. He was here. My son was here. I pushed at the doorknob, and to my shock, it turned easily. The door swung open with a long, groaning creak, and the smell of dust and damp wood rushed out. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of old smoke. The hallway stretched before me, narrow and dimly lit by a single lamp at the far end. Shadows clung to the corners, and the silence pressed in so tightly I could hear my own breath echoing off the walls. I stepped inside, my shoes sinking into the worn carpet, and the door shut behind me with a soft click that made my skin prickle. The house felt alive, like it was holding its breath, waiting. I moved slowly down the hallway, my hand brushing the wall for balance. Faded portraits lined the walls, faces of strangers with hollow eyes that seemed to follow me as I passed. From upstairs came another sound, a door closing. Then a voice, faint but familiar. My heart stopped. It was him? Mom? I froze where I stood, my eyes wide, my throat tight. I knew that voice. My son, Mom, is that you? Tears welled up in my eyes. I whispered, Yes. Yes. It's me. But before I could rush up the stairs, another voice cut through the silence. A man's voice, deep and sharp. Quiet! The sound of something heavy striking the floor followed, and then silence again. My whole body shook with rage and fear. They had him. They were keeping him here, and he was in danger. I started up the staircase, each step groaning under my weight. The air grew colder as I climbed, the shadows darker. My hand gripped the banister so tightly it hurt. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out into darkness. A faint glow spilled from a door at the far end, flickering like candlelight. I moved toward it, my breath shallow, my heart hammering in my ears. Every nerve in my body screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close. When I reached the door, I paused. The voices inside were clearer now. My son's, low and strained, and another voice, sharp and commanding. You know why you're here? The man said. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. My son's voice trembled. I didn't choose this. None of it. The sound of his pain broke me. My hand closed around the doorknob, ready to throw it open, but then, footsteps. From behind me down the hallway. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming closer. I spun, my back to the door, my eyes straining against the darkness. A shadow moved, tall and broad, blocking the faint light from downstairs. Someone else was in the house, watching, waiting. The floorboards creaked with each step as the figure moved closer. My pulse raced, and my hand tightened on the doorknob behind me. I had two choices: open the door and risk exposing myself, or face the figure closing in on me. My breath caught in my throat as the shadow stopped just a few feet away. The silence between us was unbearable. And then, in a voice that sent ice straight through me, the figure whispered, You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. Those words rolled over me like a wave of cold water. My whole body froze, my breath caught in my throat. The shadow stood tall at the end of the hallway, blocking my only escape. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Only my racing heartbeat reminded me I was still alive. I still remember that night. The suffocating silence of that hallway, the dim light leaking through the door behind me, and the way every instinct screamed at me to run, even though my legs wouldn't move. The figure stepped closer, slow and deliberate, his shoes creaking against the old wooden floor. My eyes struggled to make out his face, but the closer he came, the clearer it became. His expression was sharp, his eyes cold, as though carved from stone. Who are you? I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. He tilted his head, studying me like a predator sizing up prey. That's not the question you should be asking. I tightened my grip on the doorknob behind me, feeling the metal bite into my palm. My son was just beyond that door. I could hear the faint sound of him shifting inside, maybe even breathing. If I let this man stop me now, I might lose him forever. "I want my son," I said, louder this time. My voice shook, but there was steel in it. "I know he's in there, and I'm not leaving without him." The man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Your son made his choice. You shouldn't interfere," my heart lurched. "Choice? You call this a choice?" "He's trapped in there." I heard him. I saw the photos. "He's not free." The man's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping lower. "You've seen too much already. You should have listened when we warned you." At that, I felt the blood drain from my face. The messages, the threats, they had come from him, or people like him. "I'm his mother," I said, my voice breaking. "I will never stop looking for him. Never." For the first time, his expression cracked. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe even respect. But it vanished quickly. He stepped closer, so close now I could see the faint scar cutting across his jaw. "If you open that door," he whispered, "you won't walk out of this house alive." The words hit me like a knife, but I refused to let go of the doorknob. My son's voice echoed again inside the room, desperate, muffled. I couldn't leave him. Not now. With a surge of courage I didn't know I had, I twisted the knob and shoved the door open. The man lunged forward, but I slipped inside and slammed the door shut, locking it from the inside. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the sound of fists slamming against the door behind me, and then I saw him, my son. He was sitting in a chair, his hands bound, his face pale and tired. His eyes widened when he saw me, filling with shock, with fear, and with something deeper. Hope. "Mom?" His voice cracked, and tears burned in my eyes. I rushed to him, my hands fumbling at the ropes. "I'm here. I'm going to get you out. Just hold on." But before I could untie him, a second voice cut through the room. "You shouldn't have come." I spun around. At the far side of the room stood another man, taller than the one in the hallway. His presence filled the space like a storm cloud, his eyes sharp and merciless. And beside him, her, my daughter-in-law. She stood still, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my son. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, her body stiff, like a statue carved from fear. The man stepped forward, his voice cold. "You've ruined everything. You were warned, but you didn't listen. And now you've left us with no choice." I stood between him and my son, my body trembling but firm. "What do you want with him? Why are you doing this?" The man's eyes hardened. "It's not about what we want. It's about what he owes. About what both of them owe." He gestured toward the girl beside him, who flinched at his words. My head spun. "Oh, debt? What kind of debt could justify this nightmare?" "You don't understand," my son whispered behind me, his voice hoarse. "Mom, please just leave." "If you stay, they'll hurt you." I turned to him, tears running down my face. "No, I won't leave you. Not like this." The taller man stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the room. "You've put us in a difficult position," he said calmly. "But it's simple. You walk away now, and maybe we let him live. Or you stay, and neither of you leave this house again." The pounding on the door behind me grew louder, the hallway man trying to break through. My heart hammered as I realized how trapped we were. I looked at my son. His eyes, his tired, desperate eyes, begged me to go, to save myself. But I couldn't, not after everything. Not after the warnings, the threats, the photos, the midnight meeting. Every path I had taken had led me here. I took a shaky breath and turned back to the man. "Then you'll have to kill me," I said, "because I'm not walking away." For a moment, the room went silent. The man studied me, his cold eyes searching mine, and then his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Brave," he said softly, "but foolish." He raised his hand, signaling the man at the door. The pounding stopped. The knob rattled. The lock strained, and I knew. We had only seconds left before they came crashing in. I bent down quickly, my hands pulling at the ropes around my son's wrists. My voice was shaking but determined. When they come in, run. Don't look back. Just run! Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, Mom. But I shook my head, cutting him off. Don't argue. Just promise me. Promise me you'll run. The lock cracked. The wood splintered. The door shuddered as the figure on the other side prepared to break through. And then, before it could open, my daughter-in-law moved. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm, her eyes finally lifting to meet mine. Stop, she said. If you want him, you'll have to go through me too. The room froze. The taller man turned to her, his face twisting in shock and fury. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't the enemy. She was trapped, just like him. The question was, could she save us, or had she just doomed us all? Her words still echo in my memory. Stop. If you want him, you'll have to go through me too. I still remember that night, the sudden silence that fell over the room when she said it, the way even the air seemed to pause, as if the house itself was holding its breath. For a moment, none of us moved. The tall man stared at her in disbelief, his fury barely restrained, while my son and I watched with wide eyes, caught between shock and hope. And then everything exploded. The door behind me burst open with a violent crack, wood splintering as the scarred man from the hallway stormed in. His eyes blazed with anger as he locked onto me. You should have listened, he growled. The tall man pointed toward us, his voice sharp like a whip. Take them! Before I could even react, my daughter-in-law stepped in front of me, her arms spread wide. Her whole body trembled, but her voice was fierce. No, not them. You want me? Take me instead. The scarred man hesitated. For the first time since I'd seen him, he actually looked uncertain. His gaze flicked to the tall man, waiting for his command. The tall man's expression twisted in rage. You think you can betray us? He hissed at her. After everything we did for you? After everything we gave you? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head just slightly, and for the first time she met my eyes. In her gaze, I saw something raw and human. Fear, yes, but also guilt. And under it all, resolve, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. When I say run, take him. Don't stop, my breath caught. My hands tightened on the ropes around my son's wrists, pulling at them with all my strength. The fibers began to fray, but not fast enough. The tall man's fury boiled over, his voice shaking the walls. Enough, he roared. He lunged forward, grabbing her arm, yanking her aside. But she didn't fight back. She moved with him. And in that split second, she stomped her heel against the floor, revealing something hidden beneath the rug. A small metallic glint. A key. My heart leapt. She'd hidden it there all along. Her hand shoved the key across the floor, sliding it toward me as the tall man dragged her back. She screamed as his grip tightened, but her eyes never left mine. Now! She cried. I snatched the key and tore at the cuffs binding my son's wrists. The lock clicked open and the ropes fell away. His arms were free. Run! I shouted, pulling him up from the chair. My son stumbled, his legs weak from being bound for so long, but adrenaline gave us both strength. We bolted toward the door, the scarred man lunging after us. But before he could reach us, my daughter-in-law twisted violently in the tall man's grip, slamming her elbow into his stomach. He staggered back, just enough to slow them down. Her scream filled the air, raw and desperate. Go! Don't look back! We tore down the hallway, my son clutching my hand, both of us gasping for breath. The house shook with shouts and footsteps as they chased us, the sound of rage following close behind. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner a trap. Mom, this way! My son gasped, pulling me toward a narrow staircase at the back of the hall. We stumbled down it, nearly tripping in the dark, our hearts hammering. The air grew colder as we reached the bottom, the faint smell of damp wood filling my nose. The basement. We burst into a wide, dimly lit space. Old boxes and broken furniture lined the walls. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting dizzying shadows. We can't hide here, I panted. They'll find us. My son shook his head, his eyes frantic. There's a door. A back exit. He showed me once when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Hope flared inside me. Where? He pointed to a stack of boxes against the far wall. Together, we shoved them aside, revealing a narrow wooden door, half rotted and covered in dust. My hands fumbled with the latch, my fingers slippery with sweat. It wouldn't budge. Come on, I whispered desperately, pulling harder. Please, please. Above us, footsteps thundered. Shouts echoed down the stairwell. They were coming, and then the door gave way. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and fresh against my skin. For a split second, I felt freedom. The outside world. The stars above. But just as we slipped through, a voice bellowed behind us. There they are! The scarred man barreled down the stairs, his eyes blazing, a knife glinting in his hand. The tall man followed close behind, dragging my daughter-in-law by the arm, her face pale but her eyes burning with defiance. Go, she screamed again, thrashing against his grip. My son grabbed my hand, pulling me through the doorway. We stumbled into the night, our feet pounding across the damp grass. The cold bit into my lungs, but I didn't stop. The trees loomed ahead, their dark branches like arms reaching out to shield us. Faster! I urged, my legs aching, my chest on fire. Behind us, the sound of pursuit grew louder. They were close. Too close. We dashed into the woods, branches whipping at our faces, the ground uneven beneath our feet. My son stumbled, nearly falling, but I caught him, dragging him onward. The world blurred into darkness and shadows, every rustle of leaves sending terror down my spine. Then, lights. Up ahead, through the trees, faint but real. A road, a chance, we're almost there, I gasped. But just as hope surged, something whizzed past my ear. A blade. It buried itself in a tree trunk inches from my head. I screamed, jerking forward. They're throwing knives! My son cried, his voice ragged with fear. We pushed harder, every step agony, until finally we broke free of the trees, stumbling onto the gravel road. My legs gave out and I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. Headlights, blinding, white headlights. A car was coming down the road. I scrambled to my feet, waving my arms frantically. Help, please! Stop! The car screeched to a halt, its tires grinding against the gravel. A man stepped out, his flashlight cutting through the dark. Hey, what's going on here? I grabbed my son's arm, pulling him close. Please, you have to help us. They're after us! But before I could finish, the scarred man burst from the trees, his knife raised, his face twisted in rage. The stranger froze, his eyes wide. What the? And in that moment I realized the nightmare wasn't over. We had escaped the house, yes, but the fight for our lives was only beginning. I still remember that night, the way the road glowed under the headlights, the smell of damp earth, the sound of my son's ragged breathing as I clutched his arm, begging for help. The stranger's flashlight shook in his hand as he watched the scarred man step out of the trees, his knife glinting under the cold moonlight. For one terrifying heartbeat, everything hung in silence, like the world was waiting to see who would make the first move. Stay behind me, the stranger shouted, pulling something from his waistband. A gun. His voice cracked with both fear and determination. Drop the knife, now! But the scarred man only grinned, his teeth flashing like a predator's. You don't know what you're stepping into, he hissed, his steps slow and deliberate. This isn't your fight. The tall man emerged from the shadows too, dragging my daughter-in-law by the arm. She stumbled, but her eyes locked on me, fierce and burning with the same resolve I had seen in the house. She mouthed the word, run. I couldn't, not this time. I had run enough. The stranger's hand trembled, but he didn't lower the gun. I said drop it, he barked. The scarred man lunged, a shot split the night. The crack echoed through the trees, making the ground itself seem to shake. The scarred man staggered back, his knife falling from his hand as he collapsed into the dirt, groaning in pain. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My ears rang from the sound. My heart felt like it was going to break through my ribs. The tall man froze, his grip tightening on my daughter-in-law. His eyes blazed with hatred as he glared at me. "You don't understand," he spat. "You're ruining everything. Do you know what's at stake?" I held my son closer, my voice shaking but strong. "Then tell me. Tell me why. Why him? Why us?" The tall man's face twisted, caught between rage and despair. For the first time, he seemed less like a monster and more like a man who had already lost. "It was supposed to save us," he muttered. "A debt, a promise. Your son was the price." My stomach dropped. "A price? For what?" My daughter-in-law cried out, her voice breaking through his grip. "For me?" she screamed. "It was for me!" The words hit me harder than the gunshot had. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she forced herself to speak. "Before we married, I made a mistake. I got involved with them. I thought I could get out, but they wouldn't let me. They told me I owed them, that I would pay no matter what. And when I couldn't, they said my husband would." She sobbed, her knees buckling. The tall man yanked her upright, but his eyes no longer burned with anger. They burned with something else. Fear. "They gave us no choice," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." But they wouldn't stop. "They never stop." My son's hand tightened on mine. His face was pale, but his jaw clenched. "You should have told me," he said softly, his voice heavy with both pain and love. "You should have trusted me," the tall man hissed, shoving her forward. "She couldn't. None of you understand what we're up against." His voice cracked, wild and desperate. "This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. If he doesn't pay, we all suffer." The stranger's gun never wavered. "Let her go," he warned, his voice sharp. "It's over." But I could see it in the tall man's eyes. It wasn't over for him. Not yet. His grip tightened on her arm, his face twisting in determination. He was ready to drag her back into the woods, into that nightmare, even if it meant dying for it. I stepped forward, my voice low, trembling but steady. "Look at her. She's not with you anymore. She chose us. She chose him. It's finished." For a long, awful moment he stared at me, then at her. His chest rose and fell in shallow, broken breaths. And finally, his hand loosened. She stumbled away from him, collapsing onto the gravel road, sobbing into her hands. My son rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. The tall man's shoulders sagged, his strength draining out of him. He looked at me one last time, his voice hollow. "You've condemned us all," he whispered. Then he turned and fled into the darkness of the trees, vanishing like smoke into the night. The scarred man still writhed on the ground, clutching his wound, but the stranger kept his gun trained on him until the sound of sirens filled the air. Blue and red lights flashed against the trees, growing brighter, louder, closer. Relief washed over me, so powerful it brought me to my knees. My arms wrapped around my son and his wife, holding them close, my tears soaking into their shoulders. We were together. We were alive. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of fear begin to lift. The police swarmed the scene, their voices sharp, their lights blinding. The scarred man was taken into custody, his fury silenced by handcuffs. Officers rushed into the woods to search for the tall man, but I knew, deep down, he was already gone. Hours later, as the chaos faded and we sat wrapped in blankets in the back of an ambulance, I looked at my son. His face was bruised, his eyes tired, but he was here, safe, breathing, alive. He looked at me, his voice soft but certain. "You saved me." I shook my head, squeezing his hand. "No, we saved each other." Beside him, my daughter-in-law wiped her tears, her eyes filled with both guilt and gratitude. She whispered, "I'm so sorry." I studied her for a long moment. She had made mistakes, terrible ones. But in the end, she had chosen to stand with us, to fight for him, for us. And that was what mattered. "We'll get through this," I told her, my voice steady. Together. The night had been long. The fear had been real. But as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with pale gold, I finally felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. And that's where my story ends. We survived. We found the truth. And though the scars of that night will never fade, neither will the strength we discovered in each other. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. It means more than you know. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep these stories alive.